She hid the real footage. That's what a little girl said, and that simple sentence was the start of a massive revelation. A furious millionaire decided to confront the editor. But why did she hide the original material? What was in that footage that no one wanted the public to see? Today, you're going to find out the whole truth. And get ready, because what was behind the cameras will shock you. Stay with me until the end. You won't believe what was revealed. The revelation: the autumn rain pelted against the windows of Channel 7 News as 6-year-old Emma Martinez clutched her mother's hand in the lobby. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the marble floor, making the little girl's worn sneakers squeak with each nervous step. Maria Martinez, a cleaning lady who had worked at the station for 3 years, guided her daughter toward the elevator, her own heart heavy with the weight of secrets she'd been carrying. "Mommy, why do we have to go to work with you today?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the bustling newsroom sounds that echoed from the upper floors. "Because Mrs. Rodriguez is sick, Mia, and I couldn't find anyone to watch you," Maria explained, pressing the button for the 3rd floor. "You have to be very quiet and stay close to me, okay?" As the elevator doors opened, they stepped into the heart of Channel 7's newsroom. The familiar chaos of ringing phones, clicking keyboards, and urgent conversations filled the air. Maria had always found comfort in the predictable rhythm of her work, emptying trash cans, wiping down desks, vacuuming the carpets after the evening news team went home. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the weight of what she'd accidentally discovered 2 weeks ago pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. Emma's eyes grew wide as she took in the maze of cubicles, the wall of monitors displaying various news feeds, and the glass-walled offices where important-looking people in suits gestured animatedly during late-night meetings she'd never seen. Where her mother worked, and the sheer scale of it all made her feel very small. "This is where they make the news, Mommy?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "See, Mia. This is where they tell people what's happening in the world," Maria replied, pulling her cleaning cart from the supply closet. "Now remember, you need to sit right here while I work. Don't touch anything, and don't go anywhere without telling me." Maria positioned Emma on a small chair near the editing bay, where rows of high-end computers and monitors created a technological fortress. This was Sofia Reyes Domain, the senior video editor who had been with Channel 7 for 8 years, and whose reputation for perfectionism was legendary throughout the industry. Maria had always admired Sofia from afar, watching the elegant woman work late into the night, her dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, her fingers dancing across keyboards and control panels with the precision of a concert pianist. What Maria didn't know was that Sofia was currently in a conference room 3 floors up, engaged in a heated argument with station manager Robert Shun about budget cuts and the increasing pressure to deliver sensational content over substantive journalism. The stress of maintaining her integrity in an industry that seemed to value clicks over truth had been eating away at Sofia for months. As Maria began her cleaning routine, emptying wastebaskets and wiping down surfaces, Emma's natural curiosity got the better of her. Despite her mother's warnings, she found herself drawn to one of the large monitors that had been left on. The screen displayed what appeared to be a video timeline, with dozens of clips arranged in neat rows. To Emma's young eyes, it looked like a puzzle waiting to be solved. She couldn't read the labels on the clips, but she could see the thumbnail. Images, pieces of footage that seemed to tell different stories, depending on how they were arranged. One folder, partially hidden behind another window, caught her attention. The preview image showed a familiar face, Alexander Morrison, the billionaire real estate developer whose commercials frequently appeared during her mother's telenovelas. Emma had seen Mr. Morrison on television many times, usually smiling and talking about helping families find homes. But in this hidden footage, he looked different, angry and red-faced, pointing his finger at someone off camera. The little girl's natural instinct was to understand what she was seeing, so she did what any curious child would do. She clicked on the video to make it bigger. The footage began to play, and although Emma couldn't understand all the words, she could tell that the man was very upset. He was standing in what looked like a fancy office, shouting at someone about destroying families and lies in the media. The timestamp in the corner showed it was recorded 3 months ago, but Emma had never seen this particular news story on television. "Mommy," Emma called out, her voice carrying across the quiet editing bay. "Why is the nice man from the TV commercial so angry?" Maria looked up from the desk she was cleaning, her heart stopping as she saw her daughter pointing at the monitor. There, playing in full resolution, was the footage that had been haunting Maria's conscience for weeks, the raw, unedited video of Alexander Morrison's explosive confrontation with a Channel 7 reporter about the station's coverage of his affordable housing initiative. "Emma, no!" Maria rushed over, but it was too late. Her daughter had unknowingly uncovered the footage that Sofia Reyes had been ordered to bury by the station's executives. The footage that showed Morrison not as the villain he'd been portrayed, as in the edited news story, but as a man genuinely passionate about helping working-class families, frustrated by what he saw as deliberate misrepresentation of his charitable efforts. Maria's hands trembled as she quickly closed the video window, but the damage was done. Emma had seen it, and Maria knew that the little girl's innocent questions would eventually lead to much bigger problems. For weeks, Maria had wrestled with her conscience, knowing that the truth about Morrison's housing initiative and Sofia's forced participation in hiding it could change everything. "Mommy, why did that lady hide the real footage?" Emma asked, her young mind processing what she'd witnessed with the brutal honesty that only children possess. "The man wasn't mean like they said on TV. He was trying to help people like us." Maria knelt down to her daughter's level, seeing her own moral struggle reflected in Emma's innocent eyes. She thought about their small apartment in East LA, the medical bills from Emma's father's cancer treatment that had left them drowning in debt, and the 3 jobs Maria worked just to keep them afloat. She thought about Alexander Morrison's housing initiative that could help families exactly like theirs, and how the distorted news coverage had led to its cancellation. "Sometimes, Mia," Maria said quietly, "grown-ups make mistakes. Sometimes they don't tell the whole truth." "But lying is wrong, Mommy. You taught me that." The simple truth of her daughter's words hit Maria like a physical blow. She looked around the empty editing bay, at the expensive equipment and the comfortable chairs, at the world of privilege and power that seemed so far removed from their daily struggles. But Emma was right. Lying was wrong, no matter how complicated the circumstances. As Maria finished her cleaning routine in silence, her mind raced with possibilities and consequences. She thought about Sofia Reyes, who she'd watched grow increasingly troubled over the past few weeks, staying later at the station, her usual composure replaced by a restlessness that Maria recognized as guilt. She thought about Alexander Morrison, whose reputation had been permanently damaged by the edited story, and about all the families who would never benefit from his housing program. But mostly, she thought about Emma's question, why did that lady hide the real footage? It was a question that deserved an answer, and Maria realized that she might be the only person in a position to provide it. The rain continued to fall against the windows as mother and daughter prepared to leave Channel 7 that night, neither of them knowing that their accidental discovery would soon set in motion a chain of events that would forever change the lives of everyone involved, including the brilliant but conflicted video editor who had been forced to choose between her integrity and her career, and the wealthy businessman who had given up on finding justice until a little girl's innocent question opened a door he thought had been permanently closed. Chapter 2. The weight of truth. Sofia Reyes sat in her car in the Channel 7 parking garage at 2:47 a.m., her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The underground space was nearly empty except for the security guard's vehicle and a few cars belonging to the overnight production crew. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly greenish hue that matched exactly how Sophia felt inside. She couldn't bring herself to drive home. Not yet. Not when every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alexander Morrison's face during that unedited interview. The genuine pain in his eyes when he realized how his words had been twisted. The defeat in his voice when he asked if there was any point in trying to help people when the media would always find a way to tear him down. Sophia had been editing news footage for 8 years, and she'd seen her share of manipulation and selective storytelling. It was part of the business, she'd told herself. Every station did it. You emphasized certain angles, downplayed others, created narratives that would capture and hold audience attention. But what station manager Robert Chun had ordered her to do with the Morrison interview crossed a line she'd never crossed before. The original footage showed Morrison's housing initiative in an entirely different light than the story that had aired. The edited version made him appear greedy and manipulative, suggesting his affordable housing project was just another scheme to profit from the poor. But the raw footage revealed a man who had spent his own money, millions of it, to create genuinely affordable housing for working families, with no profit motive whatsoever. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from her younger sister Carmen, who lived in a cramped apartment in Boyle Heights with her 2 young children. "Did you see the news about that housing project getting canceled? We could have qualified for one of those apartments. Why do rich people always lie about wanting to help?" The irony cut deep. Sophia's own family could have benefited from Morrison's project, and here she was, the one responsible for destroying it. She thought about Carmen working double shifts at the hospital, about her nephews sharing a bedroom that was barely big enough for one child, about the cycle of poverty that seemed impossible to break in Los Angeles. Sophia finally started her car and drove through the empty streets of downtown LA, past the homeless encampments that had grown larger each month, past the luxury condos that sat half empty while families lived in their cars. The contrast had always bothered her, but tonight it felt like an accusation. Her apartment in Silver Lake was small but comfortable, certainly better than what Carmen could afford. As she climbed the stairs to her second-floor unit, Sophia caught a glimpse of her reflection in the building's glass doors. She looked tired, older than her 32 years, with worry lines that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Inside, her laptop sat open on the kitchen table, displaying the email that had started this whole nightmare. The message from corporate, forwarded through Chun, was brief and to the point. Morrison's story must emphasize problematic aspects of development deal. Public sentiment needs to be unified against project to prevent city council approval. Shareholders expect full commitment to establish narrative. Sophia had read the email dozens of times, trying to find a way to interpret it. That didn't make her complicit in destroying an innocent man's reputation and a project that could have helped thousands of families. But there was no ambiguity in the language. She was being ordered to lie, to manipulate footage in service of corporate interests that had nothing to do with journalism. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her small balcony, looking out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, Morrison was probably awake too, dealing with the fallout from her edited story. His housing project had been canceled, his business partnerships dissolved, his reputation in ruins. All because Sophia had followed orders instead of following her conscience. The wine tasted bitter, but she needed something to help her sleep. Tomorrow was Friday, which meant another week of pretending everything was normal. Another week of avoiding eye contact with the newsroom staff, who trusted her to tell the truth through her editing choices. As she finally drifted off to sleep, around 4 a.m., Sophia's last conscious thought was about the original footage sitting on her computer at work. She'd been ordered to delete it completely, but something had stopped her. Maybe it was professional habit. Editors were trained to keep backup copies of everything. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe it was hope that someday, somehow, the truth would matter more than corporate profits. What Sophia didn't know was that her decision to preserve that footage would soon become the key to everything, and that a little girl's innocent curiosity had already set the wheels of truth in motion. 3 miles away, in a modest apartment complex in East LA, Maria Martinez was also unable to sleep. Emma had finally dozed off around midnight, but not before asking more questions about what she'd seen at the news station. Questions that Maria couldn't answer without admitting that she'd been watching Sofia Reyes work for weeks, noticing the woman's increasing distress, piecing together fragments of conversations she'd overheard while cleaning. Maria knew she was just a cleaning lady, invisible to most of the important people at Channel 7, someone they spoke freely around because they forgot she was there. But that invisibility had given her access to information that could change everything. She'd heard Chun's phone calls, seen the emails left open on executives' computers, watched Sophia's transformation from confident professional to troubled woman carrying the weight of a terrible secret. The question that kept Maria awake wasn't what she should do. She already knew the answer to that. The question was whether she had the courage to do it. Whether a single mother working 3 jobs to support her daughter had any right to challenge the powerful forces that controlled the narrative of the city. But every time doubt crept in, she heard Emma's voice. Why did that lady hide the real footage? The innocent honesty of the question cut through all of Maria's rationalizations and fears. Her daughter deserved to grow up in a world where truth mattered, where people like Alexander Morrison couldn't be destroyed by lies simply because it served someone else's interests. As dawn broke over Los Angeles, both women faced the same fundamental choice: continue living with the weight of a terrible secret, or find the courage to speak truth to power, regardless of the personal cost. The storm that had brought rain the night before was clearing, leaving the air crisp and clean. It felt like the kind of morning when anything was possible, when a video editor might finally decide to reclaim her integrity, and when a cleaning lady might realize that her voice, however small, had the power to change everything. Chapter 3. Unexpected Courage. Alexander Morrison stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office in Century City, watching the Friday morning traffic crawl along the 405 freeway below. At 38, he had built Morrison Development into one of the most successful real estate companies on the West Coast. But success felt hollow when it came at the cost of his dreams to make a real difference in the world. The housing project that had consumed 2 years of his life and $12 million of his personal fortune was officially dead. The Los Angeles City Council had voted unanimously to reject the proposal, citing community concerns about the developer's true motivations, concerns that had been manufactured entirely by Channel 7's distorted coverage of his interview. His assistant, Janet, knocked softly before entering. "Mr. Morrison, your 10 a.m. is here." The meeting with the Riverside investors. Alexander nodded without turning around. Another luxury development project. Another way to make money that meant nothing to him. He'd gotten into real estate to create something meaningful, to prove that business could be a force for good. Instead, he'd become exactly what his critics accused him of being: another wealthy developer profiting from the housing crisis while pretending to care about solutions. "Send them to conference room A. I'll be there in 5 minutes." Janet hesitated at the door. She'd worked for Morrison for 4 years and had never seen him this defeated. "Sir, are you all right?" Alexander finally turned from the window, and Janet was shocked by how much he'd aged in the past month. The stress of the housing project's failure and the subsequent media attacks had taken a visible toll. His usually impeccable appearance was still perfect, but something vital had gone out of his eyes. "I'm fine, Janet, just tired." As she left, Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from his father. "Saw the news coverage. Told you charity work was bad business." Stick to what you know. His father's message stung because part of Alexander feared it might be true. Maybe he'd been naive to think he could use his wealth and influence to actually help people. Maybe the cynics were right, and the system was too corrupt to allow genuine change. 30 floors below, Maria Martinez was having her own crisis of courage. She'd brought Emma to school early and taken the bus to Century City, standing outside Morrison Development's gleaming tower for 20 minutes, working up the nerve to go inside. She'd never been in a building this expensive before, and everything about it intimidated her, from the marble lobby to the security guards in their crisp uniforms. But Emma's question echoed in her mind. Why did that lady hide the real footage? The more Maria thought about it, the more she realized that Morrison deserved to know the truth about what had happened to him. He deserved to know that someone at Channel 7 had deliberately destroyed his reputation and his project. The lobby was busy with well-dressed business people moving purposefully between elevators, their conversations filled with terms Maria didn't understand, but which clearly represented enormous amounts of money. She felt completely out of place in her cleaning company uniform, but she forced herself to approach the reception desk. "Excuse me," she said to the perfectly groomed receptionist. "I need to speak with Mr. Morrison." The receptionist looked Maria up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's very important. It's about the news story that Mr. Morrison doesn't see people without appointments." The receptionist cut her off. "If you'd like to leave a message, I can have someone from his office call you back." Maria felt her courage failing. This was exactly what she'd expected, to be dismissed and ignored because of who she was and how she looked. She started to turn away, but then she thought about Emma watching the hidden footage, about Sofia Reyes carrying the weight of her secret, about all the families who would never get the chance to live in decent, affordable housing. "Please," Maria said, her voice stronger this time. "Tell him that someone from Channel 7 has information about the real footage. Tell him a little girl found something that changes everything." The receptionist paused, her finger hovering over the phone. There had been something in Maria's voice, a sincerity that cut through the usual chaos of people trying to get access to Morrison. Against her better judgment, she picked up the phone. "Mr. Morrison? I have someone here who says she has information about Channel 7 and some footage." "Yes, sir. I'll send her up." Maria's hands were shaking as the elevator climbed to the 40th floor. She'd never been this high in a building before, and the view through the glass elevator walls was both thrilling and terrifying. When the doors opened, she found herself in a reception area that looked like something from a magazine, all modern furniture and abstract art. Janet greeted her with professional courtesy but obvious curiosity. "Mr. Morrison will see you in just a moment. Can I get you some water or coffee?" Before Maria could answer, a door opened and Alexander Morrison himself emerged. He was taller than he appeared on television, with graying temples that made him look distinguished rather than old. But what struck Maria most was the sadness in his eyes, the same defeated look she'd seen in Sofia Reyes' face. "Mrs." Alexander extended his hand. "Martinez, Maria Martinez." She shook his hand, surprised by how genuine his greeting seemed. "Please come into my office. Janet, hold my calls." Alexander's office was larger than Maria's entire apartment, with windows offering a panoramic view of Los Angeles. But he didn't try to intimidate her with the setting. Instead, he gestured to a comfortable seating area away from his imposing desk. "You mentioned something about footage from Channel 7. Alexander asked, his voice carefully controlled, but with an underlying current of hope that he was trying not to show. Maria took a deep breath. "Mr. Morrison, my daughter. She's 6 years old, and she saw something she wasn't supposed to see. The real footage of your interview. The parts they didn't show on TV." Alexander's expression didn't change, but Maria could see his hands tighten slightly. I'm not sure I understand. I work as a cleaning lady at Channel 7, Maria continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. I brought my daughter to work with me 2 nights ago, and she accidentally found a video on one of the computers. She asked me why the nice man from the commercials was so angry, and why the lady hid the real footage. What exactly did she see? Alexander's voice was very quiet now. She saw you talking about wanting to help families. She saw you getting upset because someone was lying about your housing project. She saw the truth, Mr. Morrison, and she wanted to know why they hid it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Alexander stared out the window at the city below, processing what Maria had just told him. The footage he thought had been destroyed still existed. Someone at Channel 7 had preserved evidence of what really happened. Mrs. Martinez, he said. Finally, do you understand what you're telling me? Do you realize the implications of what your daughter found? Maria nodded. I think so. You're not the bad person they made you look like on TV. Your housing project could have helped people like me, people like my family, and someone decided to lie about it. Why are you here? Alexander asked. Why are you telling me this? Maria thought about all the reasons she could give. Her own need for affordable housing, her anger at the injustice, her desire to see Sofia Reyes freed from the burden of her secret. But in the end, there was only one answer that mattered. Because my daughter asked why someone would hide the truth, Maria said simply. And I realized I couldn't answer that question unless I was willing to help reveal it. Alexander studied Maria's face, seeing something he'd almost forgotten existed, genuine integrity, uncomplicated by personal agenda or political calculation. Here was a woman who had nothing to gain and everything to lose by coming forward, yet she'd found the courage to do what was right. Mrs. Martinez, Alexander said, I think your daughter might have just changed everything. Chapter 4, Unlikely. Always Sofia Reyes arrived at Channel 7 that Friday morning with a plan she'd formulated during her sleepless night. She would copy the original Morrison footage to a secure drive, then find a way to get it to Morrison himself. It wasn't much of a plan, and it would certainly cost her job, but she couldn't carry the weight of the lie any longer. What she didn't expect was to find Robert Chun waiting in her editing bay at 7:30 a.m., his arms crossed and his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. Sophia, we need to talk, Chun said without preamble. Conference room B now. Sophia's heart sank as she followed him down the hallway. Someone had discovered her backup files, or maybe they'd found out about her growing reluctance to follow orders. Either way, she was about to face the consequences of her conscience. Conference room B was small and windowless, designed for difficult conversations that management preferred to keep private. Chun closed the door and turned to face her, his usual facade of friendly professionalism completely gone. I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer, Chun said. Did you delete all copies of the Morrison raw footage as instructed? Sophia felt time slow down. This was the moment she'd been dreading and anticipating for weeks. She could lie, claim the files were gone, and probably save her job. Or she could tell the truth and accept whatever consequences followed. No, she said simply. I didn't. Chun's face reddened. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand the position you've put this station in? I understand that we aired a story that wasn't true, Sophia replied, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. I understand that we destroyed a man's reputation and killed a project that could have helped thousands of families. That's not your decision to make. Chun slammed his hand on the conference table. Your job is to edit footage according to station directives, not to play journalism ethics professor. My job is to tell the truth through video, Sophia shot back, her own anger finally surfacing. Or at least it used to be. Chun took a deep breath, visibly trying to control himself. Sophia, you've been with us for 8 years. You're talented. You're professional, and until recently, You understood how this business works. Don't throw away your career over some misguided sense of principle. What if it wasn't misguided? Sophia asked, what if we were wrong? We weren't wrong, Chun said firmly. We were doing our job. Morrison is a wealthy developer trying to profit from the housing crisis. The fact that he's good at public relations doesn't change that fundamental truth. Have you actually looked at the numbers for his project? Sophia challenged. Have you seen his financial projections? He was going to lose money on every unit, Robert. He structured it as a charitable foundation, specifically to avoid making a profit. Chun's expression flickered with something that might have been doubt, but he quickly suppressed it. That's not the point. The point is that you've violated direct orders and compromised the station's editorial integrity. Editorial integrity? Sophia couldn't keep the disbelief out of her voice. We aired a deliberately misleading story to serve corporate interests. How is that integrity? Before Chun could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. As he read it, his face went pale. What is it? Sophia asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Chun looked up at her with something approaching panic in his eyes. Morrison's office just called. He wants to meet with our news director and senior editorial staff this afternoon. He says he has new information about our coverage of his housing project. Sophia felt her stomach drop. Somehow Morrison had found out about the original footage. But how? Meanwhile, across the city, Alexander Morrison was having a very different kind of meeting. Maria Martinez sat in his office, no longer intimidated by the surroundings, as they worked together to plan their next move. The question is how to approach this, Alexander said, pacing behind his desk. If I simply call the station and demand they air the original footage, they'll just deny it exists. But I know it exists, Maria said. I saw my daughter watching it. And I know the woman who has it, Sophia Reyes. She's been upset about something for weeks. I think she wants to tell the truth, but she's scared. Alexander stopped pacing. You know the editor personally? Not personally, but I clean her editing area every night. I've watched her work. She's not like the others at the station. She cares about getting things right. That's why this has been so hard for her. Would she be willing to meet with us? Maria considered this. Maybe. But not at the station. Too many people watching. And she'd be risking her job. Alexander sat back down, his mind racing through possibilities. What if we could make it safe for her? What if we could guarantee that telling the truth wouldn't destroy her career? How would you do that? I'm not sure yet, Alexander admitted. But I didn't build this company by accepting defeat at the first sign of resistance. There has to be a way. Maria's phone rang, and she glanced at the screen with concern. It's my supervisor at the cleaning company. I'm supposed to be working this morning. Take it, Alexander said. But Maria... would you be willing to help me contact Ms. Reyes? To set up a meeting? Maria answered her phone and had a brief, tense conversation with her supervisor about missing her morning shift. When she hung up, her expression was troubled. I might lose my job over this, she said quietly. I've already used all my sick days for Emma's doctor appointment, and now I'm missing work to be here. Alexander felt a stab of guilt. In his focus on clearing his name and saving his project, he'd forgotten that Maria was taking enormous personal risks to help him. She could lose her job, her income, her ability to support her daughter. Mrs. Martinez, he said seriously, I want you to know something. Regardless of what happens with the Channel 7 situation, I'm going to make sure you don't suffer financially for doing the right thing. If you lose your job because of this, I'll help you find another one. If your family faces any hardship because you chose to help me, I'll make it right. Maria looked at him with surprise. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do, Alexander said firmly. You came here because your daughter asked an honest question about justice and truth. The least I can do is make sure that your courage doesn't cost your family everything." For the first time since she'd entered his office, Maria smiled. "Emma would like you, Mr. Morrison. She has a good sense about people." "I'd like to meet her someday," Alexander said, and realized he meant it. "But right now, we need to figure out how to reach Sofia Reyes, how to convince her that the truth is worth the risk." Maria thought for a moment. "Tonight, I have to work late because I missed this morning. Sofia always stays late on Fridays to finish her projects. If you could find a way to meet her away from the station, ... Where? There's a coffee shop across the street from Channel 7, Cafe Luna. She goes there sometimes when she needs to think. If I could get word to her that someone wants to help her tell the truth." Alexander felt the first spark of real hope he'd experienced in weeks. "Mrs. Martinez, I think your daughter's question is about to change more than just our lives." As they continued to plan, neither of them realized that Sofia Reyes was at that very moment sitting in Conference Room B, facing the most important decision of her career. The convergence of their three lives, the wealthy developer seeking justice, the cleaning lady driven by her daughter's innocent wisdom, and the video editor torn between conscience and career, was about to create a collision that would shake the foundations of Channel 7 News and everyone connected to it. The truth, as Emma Martinez had discovered, has a way of demanding to be heard, regardless of how powerful the forces trying to silence it. Chapter 5. The meeting. Sofia Reyes sat in Cafe Luna at 6:47 p.m., her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The small coffee shop across from Channel 7 was nearly empty. Just a few students with laptops and an elderly man reading a newspaper in the corner. Sofia had been there for over an hour, trying to work up the courage to go back to the station and clean out her desk. Her meeting with Chun that morning had ended with an ultimatum: delete all remaining copies of the Morrison footage by end of business Friday, or be terminated for insubordination. Sofia had agreed to the deadline, but she hadn't agreed to comply with it. Instead, she'd spent the day copying files to multiple secure drives, preparing to go public with the truth, even if it destroyed her career. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and Sofia looked up to see Maria Martinez entering, still wearing her cleaning company uniform. The woman's eyes scanned the room until they found Sofia, and then she approached with obvious nervousness. "Ms. Reyes," Maria said quietly, "I'm Maria Martinez. I work at the station. I clean your editing area." Sofia recognized her immediately. "Of course, Maria. Please sit down. But how did you know I'd be here?" Maria sat across from her, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I need to tell you something important. About the Morrison footage. About what my daughter saw." For the next 10 minutes, Maria explained everything. Emma's accidental discovery of the hidden video, her innocent questions about why the truth had been buried, and Maria's growing realization that she couldn't remain silent while an innocent man's reputation was destroyed. Sofia listened in stunned silence, occasionally glancing around the cafe to make sure no one was overhearing their conversation. When Maria finished, Sofia sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the implications. "Your daughter, she actually saw the original footage?" "Yes, and she asked why you hid it." Maria's voice was gentle but direct. "I told her that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. But she said lying is wrong, and I realized she was right. I didn't want to hide it," Sofia said quietly. "I was ordered to edit it that way. I was told my job depended on it." "I know," Maria said. "I've been watching you these past few weeks. I can see how much this has been hurting you." Sofia felt tears welling up in her eyes. For weeks, she'd felt completely alone with her terrible secret. The idea that someone had noticed her struggle, had seen her pain, was almost overwhelming. "Maria, do you understand what you're risking by talking to me about this?" "If Chun finds out..." "I already talked to someone else," Maria interrupted. I went to see Mr. Morrison this morning. Sophia's coffee cup clattered against the saucer as she set it down too quickly. You what? He deserves to know the truth. And double quotes. Maria hesitated, then forged ahead. He wants to meet with you, to talk about what really happened. That's impossible. I can't. He's here. Sophia turned to follow Maria's gaze and saw Alexander Morrison entering the cafe, looking around uncertainly until he spotted their table. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, but he still commanded attention simply by his presence. Sophia felt her heart racing as he approached. Ms. Reyes, Alexander said, extending his hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I didn't exactly agree, Sophia replied, but she shook his hand anyway. Maria ambushed me. Alexander smiled for the first time in weeks. Mrs. Martinez has a talent for cutting through complexity to find simple truths. Her daughter seems to have inherited the trait. He sat down, and Sophia found herself studying his face. This was the man she'd been ordered to portray as greedy and manipulative, but in person, he radiated a sincerity that was impossible to fake. She thought about the raw footage, about his genuine passion for helping families, about the tears in his eyes when he realized how his words had been twisted. Mr. Morrison, Sophia said carefully, I want you to know that I never wanted to edit that story the way it aired. I was following orders, but that doesn't make it right. I understand, Alexander said. I also understand that you preserved the original footage. That took courage. It also might cost me my job, Sophia admitted. My boss gave me until tonight to delete all copies, or I'm fired. What if there was another option? Alexander asked, what if we could find a way to tell the truth that didn't destroy your career? Sophia looked between Alexander and Maria, seeing hope in both their faces that she desperately wanted to share. How? Alexander leaned forward. What if we went public together? What if we called a press conference where you presented the Kenguinwen original footage? I explained what really happened, and we made it clear that you were the one with the integrity to preserve the truth. The other stations would never air it, Sophia said. Channel 7 has too much influence in this market. Then we don't go through traditional media, Alexander replied. We go direct to the public. Social media, YouTube, independent journalists. Who care more about truth than advertising revenue? Maria spoke up quietly. My daughter asked me why someone would hide the truth. I think she also deserves to know what happens when people decide to tell it. Sophia sat in silence for several minutes, weighing her options. Stay silent and keep her job while knowing she'd helped destroy an innocent man and a project that could help thousands of families, or risk everything to set the record straight. There's something else you should know, Sophia said finally. The Morrison story wasn't the first time I've been ordered to manipulate footage to serve corporate interests. It's been getting worse over the past year. More pressure to create narratives instead of reporting facts. Alexander's expression darkened. How often? Monthly at least. Usually it's smaller stories, budget, debates, zoning issues, local politics. But it's always the same pattern. We're told how the story needs to play, regardless of what the actual facts support. Do you have examples? Other cases where the truth was deliberately distorted? Sophia nodded slowly. I've been keeping copies of everything. I told myself it was for professional protection, but really, I think I knew this day would come eventually. Alexander and Maria exchanged glances. What they'd initially seen as a single case of journalistic misconduct was apparently part of a much larger pattern of corruption. Ms. Reyes, Alexander said seriously, if you're willing to come forward with all of this, we're not just talking about clearing my name. We're talking about exposing a systematic abuse of public trust. This could change everything. Sophia thought about her sister Carmen, working double shifts at the hospital while trying to raise 2 children in a cramped apartment. She thought, about all the families who could have benefited from Morrison's housing project. She thought about Emma Martinez, a 6-year-old girl who had the moral clarity to ask why adults were hiding the truth. "I'll do it," Sophia said quietly, "but I want to do it right. Full transparency, all the evidence, everything that shows how the system has been corrupted." Alexander felt a surge of hope unlike anything he'd experienced since his project was canceled. "When?" "Give me the weekend to prepare everything," Sophia said. "Monday morning, we go public with all of it." As they prepared to leave the cafe, Maria touched Sophia's arm gently. "Thank you for this. For having the courage to tell the truth." "Thank you for asking the right questions," Sophia replied. "And thank your daughter for me. Tell her that. Sometimes adults do make mistakes, but sometimes they also find the courage to fix them." Outside the cafe, the three unlikely allies stood together under the streetlights, looking up at the Channel 7 building where the lies had been manufactured and where, come Monday morning, the truth would finally be revealed. None of them knew exactly what consequences awaited them, but they all knew that some truths were worth fighting for, regardless of the personal cost. Emma Martinez's simple question, "Why did that lady hide the real footage?" had brought together a wealthy developer, a working mother, and a conflicted video editor in a common cause that would soon shake the foundations of Los Angeles media and prove that sometimes the most powerful force for change comes from the most unexpected places. Chapter 6. Preparation and Doubt. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and mounting anxiety for all three conspirators. Sofia Reyes had spent Saturday and Sunday in her apartment, systematically organizing years of compromised stories, creating a comprehensive database of how Channel 7 had manipulated news coverage to serve corporate interests. The scope of the corruption was staggering. Dozens of stories, hundreds of hours of altered footage, millions of viewers who had been deliberately misled. By Sunday evening, Sofia had compiled evidence of systematic bias in coverage of city council elections, environmental impact studies, police misconduct cases, and housing development projects. The Morrison story wasn't an aberration, it was part of a calculated strategy to shape public opinion in favor of specific business interests. Her phone had been ringing constantly all weekend, calls from Robert Chun demanding to know if she'd deleted the files as ordered. Sofia had let them all go to voicemail, knowing that once she answered, there would be no turning back from the confrontation that awaited. At 7 p.m. Sunday, her sister Carmen called. "Sofia, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you all weekend." "I'm sorry," Sofia said, realizing she'd been so focused on preparing for Monday that she'd ignored everyone in her personal life. "I've been working on something important. Are you okay? You sound strange." Sofia looked around her apartment, now covered with printed emails, video transcripts, and timeline charts that documented years of journalistic corruption. Tomorrow she would either be a whistleblower hero or an unemployed pariah. Possibly both. "Carmen, what would you say if I told you I was about to do something that could change our family's life forever, but might also destroy my career?" "I'd say that depends on what it is and why you're doing it." Sofia thought about Morrison's housing project, about all the families like Carmen's who could have benefited from affordable housing if the truth had been told instead of buried. "I'm doing it because someone has to," Sofia said finally. "And because a little girl asked her mother why adults hide the truth." "Sofia, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "I can't explain everything right now, but I need you to know that whatever happens this week, I love you and the boys, and everything I'm doing is to try to make the world a little bit more honest for them." After hanging up, Sofia felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about her anymore, or even about Alexander Morrison. She was about to expose a system of corruption that affected every viewer who trusted Channel 7 to tell them the truth about their city. Across town, Alexander Morrison was having his own crisis of doubt. He'd spent the weekend with his legal team, preparing for the press conference and the inevitable lawsuits that would follow. His lawyers had been blunt about the risks. Channel 7's parent company had deep pockets and a reputation for destroying anyone who challenged them. Alexander, his lead attorney Sarah Chun, no relation to Robert, had said during their Saturday meeting, "You need to understand that this is going to get ugly fast. They'll attack your business dealings, your personal life, anything they can find to discredit you." "Let them," Alexander had replied. "I have nothing to hide." "Everyone has something to hide," Sarah warned. "And they're very good at finding it." Now Sunday night, Alexander stood in his penthouse looking out over the city he'd hoped to help transform. Tomorrow's press conference would either vindicate his vision for affordable housing or mark the end of his reputation in Los Angeles. But the alternative, letting Sophia's courage go to waste while the lies continued to shape public policy, was unthinkable. His phone buzzed with a text from his father. "Heard through the grapevine you're planning something stupid tomorrow. Don't say I didn't warn you about the charity business." Alexander deleted the message without responding. His father had spent 40 years building wealth through calculated cynicism, never taking a stand for anything that didn't immediately benefit his bottom line. Alexander had sworn not to follow that path, and tomorrow would prove whether that commitment meant anything. In East LA, Maria Martinez was facing the most difficult conversation of her life. Emma had been asking questions all weekend about why her mother seemed so worried, and Maria had finally decided to tell her daughter the truth about what was going to happen. They sat together on the small couch in their living room, sharing a bowl of ice cream while a Disney movie played on their old television. Emma had been chattering about school and her friends, but she'd noticed her mother's distraction. "Mommy, are you mad at me for touching the computer at work?" Emma asked suddenly. Maria's heart clenched. "No, Mia. I'm not mad at you at all. You did nothing wrong. Then why are you so sad?" Maria muted the television and turned to face her daughter fully. "Emma, do you remember what you asked me about the man in the video? About why someone hid the real footage?" Emma nodded. Solemnly, "The nice man was trying to help families like us." "That's right. And tomorrow, your mama is going to help tell everyone the truth about what really happened. That's good, right? Telling the truth is always good." "Yes, it's good," Maria sighed carefully. "But sometimes when people tell the truth, other people get angry about it. And sometimes there are consequences." Emma considered this with the seriousness that children bring to important conversations. "Will you get in trouble?" I might lose my job." "But if you lose your job, how will we pay for our apartment? How will we buy food?" The practical wisdom of a 6-year-old cut straight to the heart of Maria's fears. She'd been so focused on doing what was right that she'd pushed aside the very real possibility that her family would suffer for her principles. "I don't know, Mia," Maria admitted. "But Mr. Morrison promised to help us if that happens. And sometimes, doing the right thing is more important than being safe." Emma was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. Finally, she looked up at her mother with eyes that held wisdom beyond her years. "Mommy, is Mr. Morrison a good man?" "I think so, yes." "And the lady at the news station, is she good too?" "Yes, I think she is. Then they'll help us if we get in trouble." Good people help each other. Maria hugged her daughter tightly, amazed by the child's ability to cut through adult complexity and find simple truth. Tomorrow would bring consequences that none of them could predict, but Emma was right about one thing. Good people did help each other, and sometimes that was enough. As Sunday night turned to Monday morning, 3 adults prepared to risk everything. They'd built on the moral insight of a 6-year-old child. Sophia finished organizing her evidence and set multiple alarms to ensure she wouldn't oversleep. Alexander reviewed his statement one final time, knowing that in a few hours he would either reclaim his reputation or lose it completely. Maria set out her best dress, determined to look professional when she stood beside them to tell the world what her daughter had discovered. None of them slept well, but all of them woke with the same conviction. Some truths were worth fighting for, regardless of the personal cost. Emma Martinez's simple question had set in motion events that would reshape not just their own lives, but the entire landscape of media accountability in Los Angeles. The storm was coming, and they were ready to face it together. Chapter 7. The storm breaks Monday morning arrived gray and rainy, as if the weather itself reflected the tension that was about to explode across Los Angeles. At 9 a.m. sharp, Alexander Morrison, Sofia Reyes, and Maria Martinez stood together in the main conference room of Morrison Development, facing a room packed with reporters, cameras, and skeptical faces. Sofia had barely slept, arriving at the building at 7 a.m. to set up her equipment and test the video presentations that would expose years of systematic deception at Channel 7. Her hands trembled slightly as she connected her laptop to the projection system, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander began, "we're here today to present evidence of deliberate media manipulation that has affected countless lives and corrupted the public's understanding of critical issues facing our city." The room buzzed with skeptical murmurs. Most of the reporters present assumed this was another publicity stunt by a wealthy developer trying to rehabilitate his image after negative coverage. They had no idea they were about to witness the exposure of the biggest media scandal in Los Angeles history. 3 weeks ago, Alexander continued, Channel 7 News aired a story about my affordable housing initiative that was deliberately edited to misrepresent both my motives and the facts of the project. That story led to the cancellation of a program that would have provided genuinely affordable housing to 2,000 families. He gestured to Sofia, who stood with quiet dignity despite the career suicide she was about to commit. Ms. Sofia Reyes, the senior video editor at Channel 7, was ordered to create that false narrative. She's here today to show you what really happened and to expose a pattern of journalistic corruption that extends far beyond my case. Sofia stepped forward, her voice clear and professional despite her obvious nervousness. For the past 8 years, I've worked as a video editor at Channel 7 News. During that time, I've been repeatedly ordered to manipulate footage to serve corporate interests rather than journalistic truth. Today, I'm presenting evidence of dozens of stories where facts were deliberately distorted to influence public opinion. She clicked to her first slide, showing the original Morrison interview side by side with the aired version. The contrast was stark and undeniable. Where the aired story showed Morrison as evasive and defensive, the original footage revealed a man passionate about helping working families, frustrated by what he saw as willful misrepresentation. "This is the interview as it was conducted," Sofia explained, playing the unedited footage. "And this is what aired." The edited version followed, clearly showing how words had been taken out of context, sequences rearranged, and Morrison's meaning completely distorted. The room had gone completely quiet. Several reporters were frantically taking notes, while others held up phones to record the presentation. This wasn't a publicity stunt. This was a bombshell that would redefine media accountability standards. Sofia continued with slide after slide of evidence, environmental impact stories, edited to favor specific development projects, police misconduct footage altered to minimize apparent wrongdoing, city council election coverage skewed to favor particular candidates. Each example was meticulously documented with before and after comparisons that made the manipulation undeniable. But perhaps the most important voice in this story, Alexander said, belongs to someone who isn't here today. Mrs. Maria Martinez works as a cleaning lady at Channel 7. Last Tuesday night, her 6-year-old daughter accidentally discovered the original Morrison footage and asked a simple question: why did that lady hide the real footage? Maria stepped forward, her voice quiet but carrying perfectly in the silent room. My daughter Emma saw the truth that was hidden from everyone else. She saw that Mr. Morrison was trying to help families like ours, and she couldn't understand why someone would lie about that. Neither could I. The room erupted in questions, but Alexander held up his hand for silence. We're not just here to expose what happened. We're here to announce that we're filing formal complaints with the Federal Communications Commission, the California Attorney General's Office, and the Los Angeles District Attorney regarding systematic fraud in news reporting. We're also announcing the Morrison Foundation's commitment to fund independent journalism investigations into media corruption throughout Southern California. At that moment, Robert Chun burst through the conference room doors, flanked by 2 security guards and looking furious enough to commit violence. "This is all lies," he shouted. "These people are trying to destroy a respected news organization with fabricated evidence." Sophia turned to face her former boss with calm dignity. "Mr. Chun, everything I've presented today came directly from Channel 7's own servers. I have metadata, timestamps, and email records that confirm every allegation. You stole those files. You violated your employment contract and committed corporate espionage." "I preserved evidence of criminal fraud," Sophia replied evenly. "And I'm prepared to face any legal consequences of that decision." Alexander stepped between Chun and Sophia, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to high-stakes confrontations. "Mr. Chun, if you have evidence that contradicts anything we've presented today, we invite you to share it. Otherwise, I suggest you contact your legal department." Chun's face was red with rage, but he was clearly aware that anything he said in this room full of reporters would be immediately broadcast across the city. "This isn't over," he snarled, before storming out with his security detail. As the formal presentation concluded and reporters began shouting questions, Sophia felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in months, she didn't have to carry the weight of lies and manipulation. Whatever happened next, she had finally told the truth. Meanwhile, across the city, Emma Martinez was sitting in her first-grade classroom, unaware that her innocent question had just triggered the biggest media scandal in Los Angeles history. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had noticed the little girl seemed distracted and worried. "Emma, is everything okay?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked during reading time. "My mama might lose her job because she told the truth," Emma said matter-of-factly. "But she said sometimes doing the right thing is more important than being safe." Mrs. Rodriguez had no idea what the child was talking about, but she was struck by the seriousness in Emma's voice. "Your mama sounds very brave." "She is," Emma agreed. "And so is the lady who hid the footage, but now she's not hiding it anymore." By noon, the Morrison press conference was the lead story on every Los Angeles news station except Channel 7, which had gone into crisis mode and was running pre-recorded programming while their legal and executive teams figured out how to respond to the allegations. The hashtag hidden footage was trending on social media, with thousands of people sharing their own experiences of local news stories that had seemed biased or incomplete. The story was growing beyond Los Angeles, with national news outlets picking up the investigation and promising their own follow-up reporting. At Channel 7, Sophia's former colleagues were divided between those who supported her courage and those who feared for their own jobs. Several other editors had quietly begun reviewing their own archived footage, wondering if they too had evidence of systematic manipulation that they'd been too afraid to acknowledge. Robert Chun was in an emergency meeting with the station's board of directors, trying to minimize the damage and preserve his own career. But the evidence Sophia had presented was too comprehensive and too well documented to dismiss. The board was already discussing Chun's resignation and the possibility of hiring an independent news director to rebuild the station's credibility. As the first day of the scandal drew to a close, Sophia, Alexander, and Maria found themselves exhausted but oddly hopeful. They had kept their promise to Emma Martinez, They had answered her question about why adults hide the truth by refusing to hide it any longer. The consequences were only beginning, but the truth was finally free, and that felt like victory. Enough for one day. Chapter 8. Consequences and Revelations. The week following the press conference brought a whirlwind of consequences that none of the three conspirators had fully anticipated. By Wednesday, the story had gone national, with major networks sending teams to Los Angeles to investigate what media commentators were calling the most significant case of systematic news manipulation in recent memory. Sophia Reyes found herself at the center of a media storm that was both. The revolution in local journalism needed to be demonstrated where it had started. Her decision had paid off. Channel 7 was now the most trusted news source in Los Angeles, and their model was being replicated in cities across America. Alexander Morrison had also found his life transformed in ways he never expected. The success of his housing project had made him a national figure in affordable housing policy. But more importantly, it had reconnected him with his original vision of business as a force for social good. The Morrison Foundation now operated housing projects in 6 cities, all structured as non-profit developments that prioritized families over profit. Alexander had given away most of his personal wealth to fund the foundation, keeping only enough to live comfortably while dedicating his life to proving that capitalism could serve justice. He was currently working with Emma on a children's book about curiosity and courage. Emma had insisted that all proceeds go to funding media literacy programs in elementary schools, teaching other children how to ask the kinds of questions that could change the world. "Mr. Morrison," Emma had said during one of their writing sessions, "I think kids need to know that asking questions isn't being rude. It's being helpful." The dedication ceremony for Emma Martinez Truth Park drew hundreds of people, including families from the housing development, journalists from across the country, and politicians who wanted to be associated with the story of positive change. But the most important moment came when Emma herself took the microphone to address the crowd. Wearing her favorite blue dress and speaking with the confidence that had grown from a year of being listened to by adults, she offered wisdom that resonated far beyond the park's boundaries. "A year ago, I asked my mama why someone would hide the truth," Emma said, her voice clear and strong. "I learned that sometimes grown-ups hide the truth because they're scared, or because telling lies seems easier than telling the truth." She paused, looking out over the crowd with the serious expression that had become her trademark. "But I also learned that the truth always wants to come out. It just needs someone brave enough to help it." The crowd erupted in applause, but Emma wasn't finished. "My mama taught me that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Miss Sophia taught me that asking questions is how we make the world better. And Mr. Morrison taught me that grown-ups can change when kids show them how." She smiled then, the expression of a child who had learned that her voice mattered and her questions had power. "So I want all the kids here to remember, if you see something that doesn't seem right, ask about it. If grown-ups tell you to stop asking questions, ask them why. And if someone tries to hide the truth from you, ask them what they're afraid of." As the ceremony concluded and families began exploring the new park, the 3 adults who had been brought together by Emma's question reflected on how much their lives had changed. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Emma hadn't been curious that night?" Maria asked as they watched children playing on the new equipment. "I think Emma would have found another way to ask the right question," Sophia replied. "Kids like her don't stay quiet when something's wrong." Alexander nodded. "The question isn't what would have happened if Emma hadn't been curious. The question is why it took a child to make the adults act like adults." As the sun set over Los Angeles, Emma Martinez played in the park that bore her name, surrounded by children from families who had homes because she had asked why someone would hide the truth. The playground echoed with laughter and questions. Dozens of children who had learned from Emma's example that curiosity wasn't just acceptable, it was essential. The story that had started with a little girl's innocent question about hidden footage had become something much larger. Proof that in a democracy, the most powerful force for change is often the simplest one. A child brave enough to ask why things are the way they are, and adults brave enough to listen. Emma Martinez had asked her question and received her answer. But more importantly, she had inspired an entire city to start asking better questions of their own. And in a world that often seemed too complex for simple solutions, that felt like the most hopeful legacy of all. The truth, as Emma had discovered, always wants to come out. It just needs someone brave enough to help it. And sometimes the bravest person in the room is the smallest one, the one who hasn't yet learned that some questions aren't supposed to be asked. ***, the